Breath in your nose for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out your nose for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a deep breath in for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out your nose for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath in really tight and then breathe out. Hey, Tom, when I say awareness, what does that mean to you?
Uh, to me, it means a lot. Can I give you an example?
Yes, please.
So I go for walks almost on a daily basis, and so I notice everything around me. I notice the weather. I notice how it passes on the skin, how it feels on my skin, whether it's breezy or calm. Um, sounds, people walking by, trees, plants. I
Mhm.
mean, everything. It's almost like living in the Matrix. Um, but that's what it kind of feels to me, right?
Mhm.
So that type of awareness. So then when people are walking by, I'm also, I think I'm aware of, you know, how much they're paying attention, whether they're open or not. Um, it's amazing that in LA, you try to keep yourself open, and I smile and I'll try to exchange a glance or a look, and it's amazing how many people don't make eye contact, and then the ones that do make eye contact, they look right through you. They don't smile back or say hi, and it's just
Mhm.
like I'm like, how do you do that? How do you
Mhm.
connect with another human being for a split second like that, and then just, I mean, not not return any kind of a pleasantry or a hello. Um, so I don't make them wrong for that. It's just
Mhm.
interesting uh, that we don't connect.
Mhm.
They got the earbuds on, they got their phone in their face,
Mhm.
and it's very difficult to connect with probably 95% of the people I come in contact with.
Wow.
The people who are open are usually the older ones,
Mhm.
but everybody's like in a rush. It's just it's as often as I go for a walk, and I'm only 12 minutes from the beach, so I'll walk to the beach and I'll walk on the strand, and it's amazing. I guess I feel fortunate that one or two people connect, and sometimes I'll have a really nice conversation once in a while, which is really nice. Um, and it's just like connecting to another human being and sharing, a few moments, of life, whatever. But so when I think about awareness, I think of like how aware is the general population? And not to say maybe that they're not aware, but how easy it is maybe for some people to just turn it on and turn it off.
Mhm.
It's like I don't even know how to turn it off. Um, it's it's like one of those things where like some they never walked into a store and you'll hear somebody off on the side, they'll be like, "Oh, welcome,"
Mhm.
and I'm like, I kind of like that. It's kind of
Mhm.
cool. Um, but it's kind of like, well, a store can do that, right? They'd have to train their employees to do that or to say that. But it's like, why can't we do that out in reality, right? Out in
Mhm.
the real world. So I wonder, and I know that some people, maybe it's something that you just have. I think I've always been this way, maybe even since I was a little kid. But it's kind of like what I said earlier. It's like living in the matrix.
Mhm.
Like there's this awareness of all this kind of stuff happening all at the same time.
Okay. Why not? Let's unpack some of that. First of all, I'm
Yeah,
aware that you have a mermaid in your background, but
a
I'm also
mermaid.
aware that you have daughters. So,
Yeah, well, that's my room is the apartment is filled with their artwork.
okay.
This is where they were and they lived before the separation. Uh, So when they come home, this is home.
Okay.
So until it changes and they make other decisions, they look forward to coming home. So
Okay, great, great. But also, you said something also about like I guess the age group. So maybe you're saying that the older people tend to be more aware than the younger people. And you think that maybe because of the fact that maybe the older people have a lot more leisure time, whereas the younger people tend to be much more on a mission to be successful, and that's kind of like the way it goes in a lot of the big cities. LA is no exception.
it's a good question. It's hard to know for sure. And you wouldn't know unless you got into a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I was just at a birthday party for one of my daughters up north, and so she's 5.
Okay.
So I got to talking to the parents, and the guy was really cool and very open, and it's easy to strike up a conversation because I'm very physical. So I'm running around with the kids, and most of these fathers are probably in their 30s.
Mhm.
And I jumped up into a tree, and I'm like, it's really. I tried to get my girls to climb it, and they kind of climbed up in the crotch of it, and then they were like, I want down. I'm like, all right. And then when the fathers went to hang a pinata, they're like, do you think you could climb up there? And I'm like, absolutely. So I just kind of like shot it, like, one leg on the tree trunk and jumped up and grabbed a branch, kind of swung myself up there, hung the pinata up on a branch. So they're like, what is it that you do that you're like so physical, and that you also noticed, like, the deer tracks on the ground? We're showing the kids the deer tracks.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, I wouldn't say necessarily that's part of my job. I said, I train people. I said, but that's not what I do. I said, I'm just very physical.
Mhm.
But getting back to, he was just very open. And it turns out that he said, he used to live in Chicago. And I'm like, oh, that's the Midwest. That's where I'm from. So people in the Midwest, I think maybe have a tendency to be a lot more open. And then someone else said something about New York, because we were talking about something else. And I'm like, yeah, definitely New York is
Mhm.
totally different place. Like, nobody, you're not even supposed to look at somebody in New York, from what they say.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a cultural thing. It's where you're at, where you're from. It would be really interesting to know if you could, in a
Mhm.
moment, talk to the people that are flying by and going, where are you from?
Mhm.
Just to see how much of it is cultural, how much of it is, what they were raised with.
Yeah, and but what also we can also factor in social media, especially like with sorry about that. We have a little technical difficulty. Hopefully, we'll get Tom back on, and here you go. Is it right now? Okay, there you go. Yeah, so also I was gonna say, like with the age group and social media, and this is just a discussion, and we can conjecture a little bit because we don't really know what the true answers until we start interviewing some of these people, and that's definitely agenda of mine is interviewing and having discussions with all types of people, and so we can have deeper connections. But we can conjecture that maybe that these younger folks were raised, younger folks, these young people of the younger generations were raised on social media or have a more of a social media presence. Do you think that could possibly cause people to be disconnected and maybe less aware?
That's a good thought, because they know how to do it on social media, but they don't know how to do it in person.
Hmm.
Because when you start a conversation with somebody in person, you can't decide, hey, it's over, and you just flip to the next thing. You've kind of committed to, a conversation with a real person. So the rules are a little bit different. So yeah, I've thought of that one where people just, they don't want that commitment.
Okay, and entertain me even a little bit more. So think about it, like when we first had the discussion, you told me about a five sensational experience, five year senses were totally engaged, and you were aware of all your five senses. But when you're on a cell phone or on your computer, only one or maybe two senses are engaged. So do you think that plays a factor into our awareness being limited by
It's a
just
good point.
by just only being, especially with the younger generations, when they're so just stimulated by this sight and hearing, and primarily sight, that those other senses leads to atrophy and maybe lead to disconnection with other human beings
Well, they definitely get dulled
in
down.
a physical way.
Yeah, they definitely get dulled down. I thought it was interesting. I watch a lot of documentaries, and I was watching one the other night about, I can't remember his name, but he was a he's a professor at MIT, and I think he got a Nobel Prize for something with atoms. And he was talking about how even in his classroom, he goes, listen, I've got some really bright students in my classroom at MIT, right? He said, but he makes them take other courses where they have to go and actually use their hands. When he grew up, as a little boy, he goes, we got into all kinds of trouble. We, did a lot of stuff with our hands. And I remember doing that too. I remember I would go down the alley and I'd pull stuff out of the trash and take it back to the garage and pull it apart. And, you're learning about all different kinds of things. You're touching it with your hands. You might be smelling it. You're seeing it. So when you don't learn that way, then you're learning. How you learn becomes, more like this.
So it's tunnel vision, very, very rigid thinking.
Yeah. So you're not getting all that extra. So then it does limit your ability to be aware of what's really going on. Like, how does this person feel? Or, are they cold? Or, the reason why they're, or the reason why they are rushing the conversations because, did you notice that there's a hesitancy? Maybe there's something in the way they said, maybe they got someplace they got to be and they don't want to get caught up. And, but being able to think about all that and take that into consideration while you're communicating it's a bit of a skill. And I don't think they really learn that anymore because of what kind of like what you just said. It's a good point where on social media, you're very limited. It's all just visual and you can change your mind at any point in time. You can just flip it to the next image right away because you're not really connected. You're just watching a video. And I can choose to come back to that if I want to or just fly on to the next thing. But you can't do that in reality. So maybe to them, it's too much work. And there's a perception. I remember looking this up when I was in my 20s, because when I first came to LA, I was working at Sports Club. And I was, I'm from the Midwest. So I'm like, hey, hi, how you doing? I'm smiling, saying hi. And people just look right past you. And I'm like,
wow.
I was freaked out then. I'm like, that's crazy. How do you how do you look at somebody and look right past them?
So that's before social media even.
So I looked it up. I said, I'm a kind of a scientific kind of person. So I looked it up. I go, why? I go, what is it psychologically? What allows people to do that? And it mentioned that back then it was like, because when people make eye contact, there's this assumption that they're making a commitment. And a lot of people don't want to make that commitment, or they're afraid of making that commitment, or whatever it is they're making it mean, right? They might mean, oh my God, if I connect with this person eye to eye, it's going to turn into a conversation. Which doesn't mean that. But there is a level of commitment that people subconsciously or consciously think that they're going to have to kind of like get into. And that's why that's what the science was saying.
But so do you think like having a level of at least a minimum level of a commitment is necessary to develop your awareness or one's awareness?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, you got to spend some time with something. If you go to an art gallery, do you look at the art on the wall and then as soon as you see it, go to the next one? Then as soon as you see it, go to the next one?
I can post it on Instagram and check it off my bucket list.
Oh, I saw this. But did you really see it? Probably not. It's like the people that, mentioned that they, go to Europe and they go to the art gallery and they run right through it so they can say they went. And like, did you even see any of the artwork?
Yeah.
Noticing like the thickness of the paint, the pigment, whether it was dull or bright, how the brush strokes. I mean, all that stuff that's what nuance is and makes things, I don't know, like personal, and, it allows you to like have a relationship with it for a moment. Right. I could really tell, or there's something about it. Yeah. I don't know that's really taught. People are just kind of rushing through things. And I know that I've had conversations with parents and seen things on social media about, let your kids, like I noticed when I was at this party, like I pushed my kid up into the tree. I said, check it out. Like, is it dangerous? Yeah, it's dangerous. I go, but I'm right here. I go, there's always a chance. I go, I'm going to do the best I can to make sure you don't fall, but there's a chance. Yeah, you could get hurt. But you need to do that, because that's how you test your feelings about things, whether your intuition about whether or not, hey, should I make that move or should I not? You know, it's kind of
Well,
risky. Maybe I should do a different move.
well, let's ask another question. Do you think like kind of like this trend towards sterilization of everything, especially with the upbringing of young children, do you think that limits their ability to commit and to become more aware?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think so. There's this on social media. There's a thing called Mindful Madre. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just a mom, and she posts pictures of her kids like going out and getting in the mud and climbing on sticks,
Mm-hmm.
climbing on trees and getting into getting dirty basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, you need to have that intimate relationship with nature, especially.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be in nature. You need to have that in order to get, because that's what you are. That's what we all are.
Mm-hmm.
We are nature, and I think that's a whole nother conversation about
Mm-hmm.
forgetting about who we really are and that connection. Um, the idea. I remember when I was a little kid reading I think one of the biggest books, first book I ever read was called the Tibetan Book on Living and Dying.
Mm-hmm.
I read some books on physics and philosophy that mixed physics and philosophy and Buddhism and Taoism, and it was just like it blew my mind to know that, relatively speaking, I feel like I'm a solid object, but I'm not. I'm not really even touching myself. So even if I touch the screen, I'm not really touching a solid object. I mean, there's molecules there, and then the charges around the molecules, and when I put things together, that relationship is what I'm feeling, right? It's not something that's solid. That's only relative to me being a human, but it's not really what's happening. I'm almost like a cloud. I've got this dense center, but then my edges are really, you can't tell where it begins and when it ends unless you
Mm-hmm.
drew a picture of a cloud. But an
Yeah.
actual cloud, there is no definitive line when it stops. So when you're walking around and I'm walking around, everybody's walking, we're all clouds, and our energies are just kind of like, you can kind of tell, right? You can, when you're around somebody, it just feels really good. It's almost like your cloud edges are mixing with their cloud edges. And if you were aware of that fact, you could be aware of the fact that, hey, listen, like, we're all nature. We're all just kind of like intermingling.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of stuff going on. I was reading an article about how there is a woman was talking about when women menstruate, they give off a certain pheromone, right? There's certain chemical scent, and it gets out of their body, and it can intermingle with another person's sweat, and it gets into their sweat, and then it gets kind of like into their skin and into their body. So it was another example where I was like, exactly. It's like, we have this relationship that we're not even aware of that makes us very human and makes us intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's almost like you're making your molecules tighter, and so you bounce off of other people, so you're not intermingling as much. You're separating yourself more, but that's not really what's happening. Same thing, you might be with someone and you feel like, wow, I just get a really bad vibe from that person.
Mm-hmm.
You get the energy that comes off of that person, and you're like, you're vibrating at a certain frequency, they're vibrating at a frequency that's a little bit off, and then you're like, I don't even know this person, I haven't even had a conversation, but I just don't feel right about, something doesn't feel right, or something does feel right. So that awareness, and then when I go out in nature, and I'll pick stuff up, I'll go in and put my hand on a tree, and it's like there's this instant energy that transferred from my hand to the tree and comes back to me. I don't know if you've ever done any study on grounding.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this constant exchange of energy. So it is like the Matrix. It's like you're just walking around in this milieu of like chemicals and energy. And if you're aware of that, you have a more intimate awareness of your environment and the world you're in. And it's not something that's generally taught to people.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe it takes a long time of being curious about that stuff and learning about it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people are very quick to like, oh, that's just foo-foo stuff. And I'm like, well, it may be, but the reality is there's a reality to that. I mean, you could study physics and that would show you that. Study physics, study chemistry, study science, all that stuff will prove it.
Mm-hmm.
How you think of it, whether you think it's foo-foo or not, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, there's nothing foo-foo about quantum mechanics and quantum
right.
physics. and and so let me ask you this question then: do you consider yourself a spiritual person or a religious person
Not
or?
religious. Religious to me, religious always means business.
Hmm.
It's almost like if you were spiritual and decided to get into making money with it, that
Okay.
then it becomes a religion.
Okay.
Or it's a religion if you want to control somebody. If you're trying to be a
That's a
an
business.
individual guru and you need a bunch of people following you, then you're turning that into a religion.
Hmm.
So I would say I'm a spiritual person in the sense that, do I think when I was little, I grew up Lutheran, and I
Hmm.
remember having some experiences. I mean, I could say they're spiritual experiences, not for the sake of them being spiritual, because I had no idea at the time.
Hmm.
But I remember having very strong feelings of a presence or something, whether I was making that. And I was a kid. I was just a little kid, 7 years old, 8 years old. And, who knows what that was, right? But when I started to study and look into stuff as I got older, I'm like, well, yeah, this all kinds of makes sense, right? What that energy was, whether it was something that I conjured up and made it to be, or whoever it was, I did feel it. So take away who the authority person is supposed to be, and just go with the feeling and go, all right, well, if that's just part of you being in the world with energy, that's what you were feeling.
Or maybe could have been like a type of bias, like a confirmation bias or a frequency bias.
Well, I think the bias comes from when you want to make a story about who it is. Like I used to, I thought about this a while back, and this is my explanation of
Hmm.
religions.
Hmm.
Let's say you found yourself in a huge room, white room, brilliant, bright white,
Hmm.
and there's a article of clothing, a little pile of clothing, kind of like kind of strewn about, kind of
Hmm.
like in like a square chessboard or something. And we can say, all right, these are the religions of the world. This is another thing. Do you realize how many religions there are in the world?
I'm not familiar with. I mean,
There's approximately 4,500.
well, that's a lot. Yeah.
I mean, there's some main ones, but there's about 4,500 sects of religions.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So can you imagine one person saying, "Yeah, my religion is this is it."
They need
Really?
they need to have like a stock exchange for the
Yeah,
for
you're like, really?
the
So
religion.
yours is the only God, right? All right.
Yeah.
You do realize that your organized religion is one out of 4,500.
Yeah.
And if you were born somewhere else, if you were born in Guyana, I go, you
Hmm.
might say your God's the only one. And you know, I could never figure that out. I was in catechism when I was in school. I remember I was very young. And I remember I was learning something. They were telling us something about Jesus, and it was a story. And I remember thinking, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I said, if I was sitting at a table just like this on the other side of the world, and I was being taught, like I'm being taught now, about a religion or whatever that religion was, they would probably be learning that their religion is the one.
Hmm.
I said, but I'm learning that this is the one. I said, who's right?
So that's where the confirmation bias will come in. Yeah, I
I'm
get
like, well, who's right? And they couldn't really answer it. So I'm like, that's what kind of led me off on like, all right, well then it's not it's not the religion, it's not the story. So anyway, so getting back to so you walk into this big white room, you see
it.
this a pile of clothing. So these are the religions, right? We could all say, well, these are religions. Yeah, they're all clothing. We all got that. We see that they're religions. All right. Well, what we're gonna do next is we're gonna we put it out, and there's a big shower on the very top. And we're gonna pull the shower, and it rains bleach, and bleach rains down on all the religions. And then all of a sudden, all the color swirls into the center of the room and goes down the drain. Now all you're left with is a bunch of pile of white
Hmm.
articles of clothing. So we
Hmm.
go, that's one level deeper, right? Like, ooh, all right. What were the colors? Well, the colors were the stories, right? The stories and the characters. All right. Well, the religion isn't the story and the characters, right? It's more about, all right, now what we see is we see what's the article of clothing. What are the parameters, right? Is it a shirt? Is it a pair of pants? Is it a vest? So now we're looking at, how the little one level deeper. What's the relationship? What is it? Like, what's the boundaries? And then if we decided we would take every article of clothing right? So now we're not getting caught up in the stories about who the characters are, right? Who said what and who the characters are. Now you're looking at, the kind of the construct of the religion. Now let's say we just kind of like took them all apart, right? We unraveled them. And then we looked at it, we'd look around and we wouldn't be able to tell which religion was which. Because they were all put together with one common thread. And what's the common thread? To me, the common thread was love. Love in the world's energy. The things that scientists study. So I'm like, well, if I looked at you, no matter what religion you were, right? And we could communicate on the level of the thread, what would we war about? What would we be arguing about? The arguments just come from mostly the characters and the stories. Well, that's not the most important part of the religion. We just established that. And then you might argue that, oh, you can't, here's all the rules. Well, that was how it was put together, whether it's a pair of pants or it's a bigger thing. But what if we just focused on the common thread? When there's all this war going around the world and it's just like, all these kids are out fighting, Israelis, Palestinians, let's say, Ukraine, Russia, they're all fighting wars that were started eons ago. Why they don't even probably really have an interest in it. The only interest is because someone passed it down. Oh, you're supposed to be really pissed at these people because they did this. I'm like, well, I'll bet you all these people, all they really want to do is want to probably fall in love, maybe raise a family, or, maybe just be a contributor to their community. They want to eat, they want to sleep, they want to not worry about bills, they want to work. How about the common threads? Let's just focus on the common threads. But nobody wants to focus on the common threads because that would take learning and awareness. You'd have to be aware that you're getting caught up in the story about the characters and the color. That's not the most important part.
So you're saying true awareness, can help you find the essence of things such as love in religion, and also be able to have more of a neutral mind when it comes to making decisions about things, because you're not swayed by marketers or by dictators saying this is bad and this is good. But you can say I can assess everything, say, oh, this is bad, this has bad elements, and this has good elements. This has bad elements, and this has good elements. And then maybe start looking for more commonalities in things and with people, because in reality, we're more common than we are different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, everything in front of you, your clothing, I'm around toys all the time, and I'm like, these are all just social constructs. These are things that I came up with. I didn't even know what a train was until I decided to say, I'm going to make a train. And then all of a sudden I made a train and I told you, hey, I got this train. In physics, we did this thing, it's like fork, right? I'm in the Tao of physics. If I had a fork in my hand, I didn't show it to you, but I said, I got a fork in my hand, Richard. I said, do you get it?
Yep.
You'd have a picture in your head, right?
Yep.
It may not be the fork that I have in my hand, but the general concept of what a fork is, you got it.
Yep.
Right? If I took that fork, let's say I had a plastic fork, maybe you're thinking about a metal one. Let's say it's not really a fork. We called that thing a fork so that when I said fork, you'd know what I was talking about. So we made an agreement about what a fork was. But if I melted that fork down into a pile of, let's say mine was plastic and yours was metal, I'd have a blob in my hand. What would we say it is? Well, now you'd say, if you saw it was a plastic fork, you'd say, well, it's plastic. Well, that's not really what it is. It's plastic because we made an agreement to call that thing plastic, because I was a scientist, I had to come up with plastic. I had to take a bunch of chemicals and put them together to make this. And now we're going to call this plastic. So when I say plastic, in your head, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But that's not really plastic. That was an agreement we made. We decided to call it plastic. Now, if you were a scientist, I could call it whatever its scientific name is, right? And you'd be totally more like, oh, know exactly what you're talking about. You might even know like what kind of properties that plastic has, whether it was pliable or not pliable, that kind of thing. But is that what it is?
Well, no,
that's not even what it is. The chemical, we called that molecule that we discovered whatever name we came up with.
You're going down a slippery slope of a rabbit hole. because it's all of it. Our whole social construct is based on agreements of what we call things and what we say things are. But maybe with true awareness, like you talk about, we can look beyond just what the social construct of things is, and truly tune into what the essence of things are. Would you
But
agree
then
with
you
that
get
statement?
into, so you got that level, right? You got the
Yeah.
level of what is that? And then you got the level of, well, what does it mean? Some people
Hmm.
might make that mean something, some people don't. Do you ever see the old film called The Gods Must Be Crazy?
I've not seen this movie. No.
Highly recommend it. It's really, really old film,
Okay.
probably done in the 40s or 30s.
Okay.
And what happens is there's an Aboriginal tribe out in the middle of nowhere in Australia,
Hmm.
and a plane flies by. They have no idea what a plane is, but a
Hmm.
plane flies by, and a Coke bottle falls out of the plane, lands on the
Uh-huh.
ground. So they have no idea what a Coke bottle is. So you got to watch it. I won't go into it, but it's like
Okay. Okay. I'll watch
to
it. I'll
see
watch
what
it.
happens when we just took what we just talked about and apply that to, here's what it kind of looks like when someone doesn't know what something is.
Hmm.
And then what it does, what that thing, how it influences the community and the tribe. This
Well, that's
one thing.
that's why the Native Americans sold Manhattan for a bag of pearls, because they didn't even have the concept that you
Right.
could possess land.
They, some tribes don't even have concepts for numbers.
Yeah.
They
So.
don't have what, they don't even know what numbers are.
Hmm.
And they don't, some of them don't know what possession means.
Hmm.
So it's not, like I said, you don't want the world to go crazy, but it's just like if there was this deeper awareness
Hmm.
of what was kind of going on around you, um, almost like an already seeing kind of an awareness, it would change the way we communicate.
Mm.
It would change how we, someone just sent me an article today talking about excessive greed, like, these companies that are just making shitloads of money. They're just excessively greedy. Just, making some money isn't enough. So they keep jacking the prices up regardless of how the economy's going,
Hmm.
just because they can. And it's like how that offsets how the world functions and how much misery there is because somebody wants control or somebody wants more of something that they don't even need it. So if we were like, what would be your experience? I think I was, going on this thing earlier this week about, all these books and things about what's your purpose, right? What's your purpose in this world, right? What is it? Like, what is your purpose? Is the real purpose to evolve? Like everything else on the planet is just evolving, right?
Hmm.
So as we evolve, right? Maybe we're evolving. Maybe that's where AI is coming from. We're evolving. We've created AI and
Hmm.
all the problems and the benefits and the problems that it's going to have. We've invented it. We're humans. We're the ones that came up with it. But our main purpose is to evolve. The other purpose, I think, would be to, I can't remember what the saying is, but you ever hear a saying is something about we're beings having a human experience?
Hmm.
I believe that.
Hmm.
I think that we are, for the short period of time that we're here, the energy is inside the body. When I watched my mom pass away in front of my eyes, and it was so clear to me when I saw, I don't know what I saw, but I had a feeling the second she took her last breath and passed away, I saw the body as merely a shell. The thing that animated her, that shell, that went somewhere. I don't think didn't even make sense to me. That energy that she was just a second ago went somewhere because this is just a shell. It's just an organic shell left, and that energy went somewhere.
Hmm.
So we're basically this energy playing out almost like our body is our screen, right?
Hmm.
A movie could be playing, but you won't see it until you put a screen up and see oh, there it is.
Hmm.
But you take the screen down and it goes out into space. That energy is just shooting out into space.
Hmm.
Our energy kind of shoots out through our skin, our bodies. Our bodies are screen.
Hmm.
So what do you want to experience in the short human period of time you're on the planet, right?
Hmm.
Is it really about success and having a car and all that kind of stuff? Because I've heard people talk about that.
Mhm.
Had all the cars in the world, and they're just like, you can only sit your butt in one car at a time.
Yeah.
And then they sat there and went, I figured out I don't need all this stuff. So you have to, it goes back to what your purpose is. My purpose is I want to have a human experience. And I think love and connection is probably the most human thing I could experience.
Mhm.
So feeling love and connection to people and other human beings is probably the most important thing in me, my world.
Mhm.
I don't need all that extra stuff. If I can pay my bills, I'm good. To
Mhm.
sit with another human being and talk is, awesome. I was going to say earlier, I have had some experiences with younger people. I was walking on the beach and I saw a girl, young girl, sitting there, and I just felt like maybe there's an opening, right? I said, "Do you mind if I have a seat? Sit with you?" She's like, "Sure." And we sat and we talked, and it was. I said, I can't remember what we talked about, but I could tell that she was a real like an aware person. She was
Mhm.
much younger than me. I'm 60. She was probably in her 20s,
Mhm.
and she was visiting, and she was just sitting out and just you know feeling, hearing the ocean and feeling the ocean, and you know, and it was like I remember walking away, and we just kind of like have an awesome life. We
Yeah.
just kind of parted ways and just had a quick human share of an experience, connected for a moment. It felt really cool to connect to another human being,
Mhm.
of a different race, of a different age, a
Mhm.
different location, someone from another, area of the world. And it was
Mhm.
awesome. I'm like, give me that. I'd much rather have that than a 12